most common password in human history was 123456. The second most common was password. Password-related cybercrime cost the global economy hundreds of billions of dollars every year. The human brain is reliably capable of memorizing approximately 7 arbitrary items. In 2020, the average person maintained 100 separate passwords. You are watching this from 2150. The practice no longer exists. This is the password. The first password was not built to stop criminals. In 1961, at the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, a computer scientist needed a way for researchers sharing a single machine to keep their files from one another. The threat was not an adversary in another country. It was a colleague down the hall. His solution was simple: a word known only to the user, confirmed by the machine. That solution, designed for a room of researchers sharing one computer, became, without modification, the primary mechanism by which 4 billion people proved who they were to the connected world. By 1995, the password had entered the home. For the first time, an ordinary person sitting at a screen in their own house was asked to choose a word that only they would know. No one explained what kind of word. No one explained what would happen if they forgot it. There was a field, a blinking cursor, and a requirement. The first users had been colleagues. By 1999, they were strangers. The password was never redesigned for the difference. By 2004, there were an estimated 300 billion passwords in use globally. One mechanism, unchanged since 1961. At the height of that era, the most common form of digital intimacy was this: typing your password into a message and sending it to someone you trusted completely. No ceremony, no contract, just a string of characters and the decision that this person was worth the risk of it. Couples gave each other email passwords in lieu of spare keys. Parents and children negotiated access to shared accounts across phone calls, written on paper, mouthed silently in crowded rooms. The password became a form of currency, not just for access, but for trust made tangible in a medium that had no other way to hold it. The institutions that required it had a different understanding of what it represented. In their frameworks, the password was a legal instrument. Evidence, if a breach occurred, that the user had maintained the secret. If the secret was stolen and an account was drained, the institution's position was that the user should have kept it safer. The warmth the password carried had no standing in that framework. By 2015, the average user was managing 90 passwords. Security guidance required each to be unique, complex, and changed every 90 days. The most rational response to that requirement, arrived at independently by millions of people in offices across every time zone, was to write them down on a small yellow piece of paper and attach it to the screen. This was not a failure of intelligence. It was the most logical possible response to an illogical demand. The system blamed the user. The museum blames the system. The ritual of recovery was its own exhibition. A login fails. The machine asks, "Forgot your password?" A link is sent to an email account that also requires a password. The link expires in 15 minutes. The new password cannot match the old one. A replacement is created under time pressure. 2 weeks later, it is forgotten. The process often took several minutes. In February 2004, at the RSA Security Conference, the world's largest gathering of cybersecurity professionals, a keynote speaker told the audience that passwords were dead. He was, by most measures, the most credible person on earth to say so. He was correct. He was 20 years early. The speaker was Bill Gates. The people who should have acted were in the room. The password survived the conference by 20 years. In 2003, a government technical advisor had published guidelines adopted by banks, hospitals, governments, and corporations across every country with an internet connection. They required passwords to contain uppercase letters, at least one number, at least one symbol, and to be changed every 90 days. Within 2 years, those requirements were built into the infrastructure of nearly every institutional system on Earth. The man who wrote them watched. What they produced was not stronger passwords. They produced passwords with a capital letter at the beginning, a number at the end, and an exclamation mark added reluctantly after a prompt. They produced the precise behaviors they were designed to prevent. In 2017, at the age of 72, Bill Burr gave an interview to the Wall Street Journal. He said he regretted the guidelines he had written. He said he had done his best with what he knew and that what he had produced had made things worse. The guidelines were formally reversed in 2019. They had been wrong for 16 years. In 2013, every account Yahoo had ever created, 3 billion in total, was compromised in a data breach. The breach was discovered internally. The disclosure was not made until 2016. For 3 years, the people whose secrets had been taken continued using those secrets under the impression that they remained secret. The gap between the breach and its disclosure was not a security failure. It was a decision. By 2019, a public database of compromised credentials contained more than 10 billion records. Security researchers had a phrase for the state of the population: breach fatigue. It described the condition of an audience that had received enough breach notifications that receiving another had stopped producing a response. The password system's primary security mechanism, the human's willingness to act, had been exhausted. The replacements arrived quietly. The first asked the body instead of the memory. The second stored a code inside the device, a code that was never sent to anyone, never kept in a database, and never required to be remembered. On the 5th of May, 2022, World Password Day, 3 of the largest technology companies in the world announced jointly that they would begin making the password unnecessary. In their joint press release, the word password did not appear. The password did not have a last day. It had a diminishing return, a curve, not a cliff. The museum places the threshold at approximately 2027, the year in which the majority of consumer digital services made it optional and the majority of users never used it again. No ceremony marked the occasion. A form changed. A field was removed. The cursor, which had blinked in a password box on every connected device on Earth for 66 years, moved to a different place and asked a different question. The password was not, finally, a security system. It was a behavioral ritual imposed on human cognition by machines that could not see who you were. For 60 years, 4 billion people agreed, and without being asked, to perform the same act every single day, to prove their identity to a machine by typing a secret the machine had given them into a field that turned each character into a dot, alone, in silence, for access to a world that had no other way to recognize them. The question the museum asks from the distance of 2150 is not why the system failed. Systems fail. The question is why 4 billion people accepted every day without formal consent a requirement that their own governments could not have legally imposed because a machine required it, and the alternative was exclusion. In the early 2030s, the generation born after the password's retirement began encountering its interface in archival settings. History classes, old photographs of screens, museum exhibits not unlike this one. Some of them were asked what the field was for. They did not know. This is how most human practices end, not with the last person who used them, but with the first person who cannot imagine having needed to. The password is, in the museum's record, the practice that ended precisely at the moment a generation arrived that could not locate the problem it had solved. This object is preserved in the Museum of the Future, Gallery 4, Section Cognitive Artifacts. It was required and then abandoned by people who never agreed to it in the first place.